Dylan Theodore was a name known on the most prestigious stages of the world. A prodigy pianist who captivated audiences with his extraordinary skill. However, fate had other plans. Everything changed on a sunny afternoon when Dylan decided to escape his routine and take a ride on his Ducati, a motorcycle symbolizing freedom and power. The Atlantic stretched like a liquid mirror, reflecting the golden hues of the evening. But as Dylan sped along, lost in thoughts about his career and his fiancée, Stephanie Zoraida Baez, a small stone on the road drastically altered his destiny. The accident was brutal. The bike lost traction, and Dylan was hurled into the air like a leaf in the wind. Instinctively, he tried to protect himself, but the fall concentrated all the impact on his hands. When he woke up in the hospital, the bright, sterile light momentarily blinded him. The antiseptic smell of the room abruptly brought him back to reality. He tried to move his arms, but a sharp pain forced him to stop. Gradually, his eyes adjusted to the brightness, and that's when he saw his hands, wrapped in rigid splints, resting lifelessly on cushions. The feeling of helplessness hit him like a punch. Those hands that had once brought melodies to life, evoking tears and applause from audiences around the world, were now motionless, like plaster sculptures. The weight of reality crashed over him like an avalanche. His chest tightened, and memories of every performance, every note, every chord rushed through him like a turbulent river. "I've lost everything," he whispered to himself, as a silent tear rolled down his face. The emptiness he felt seemed infinite, as if the world he knew had vanished forever. Stephanie was there, but not in the way he had hoped. To Dylan, she had always been a symbol of perfection, an international model whose presence radiated beauty and confidence. Early in their relationship, Stephanie was more than just a partner, she was his muse. She inspired his compositions and accompanied Dylan to glamorous events, always stealing the spotlight. Yet behind her flawless facade was a woman who placed her career and image above all else. Dressed in an elegant designer gown, she seemed more concerned about the contracts she had to cancel to be by his side than the gravity of his situation. While Dylan struggled to process the devastating loss of his ability to play, Stephanie looked at him with a mix of frustration and irritation. Her words were cold and cutting, echoing like shards. "This is ruining all my plans." At that moment, Dylan realized that to Stephanie, he was nothing more than an accessory in her perfect life, something to showcase, but now deemed defective. The emptiness in her tone cut deeper than any physical pain he could endure. Dylan, consumed by both physical and emotional pain, felt his heart shatter into 1,000 pieces as he watched Stephanie. He had hoped that his fiancée, the woman who claimed to be his greatest supporter, would embrace him in this moment of vulnerability. But all he found were cold words and an empty gaze. Reality finally set in. Stephanie was a woman who had always placed her career and image above any genuine emotion. He realized that to her, he had never been more than a piece in her perfect life, something now broken and therefore disposable. This truth devastated him more than the loss of movement in his hands. As Dylan's solitude seemed to engulf him entirely, the hospital room door softly opened, revealing Samantha. She was a housekeeper in Stephanie's home, discreet and always efficient. But in that moment, something about her presence was different. Her eyes, filled with compassion, seemed to absorb Dylan's sadness as though she could feel every fragment of his pain. Samantha wasn't just an employee, she exuded an aura of empathy and serenity that radiated like a balm for Dylan's emotional wounds. Without a word, she began to care for him with a respect and dedication that starkly contrasted Stephanie's selfishness and coldness. Samantha quietly dedicated herself to helping Dylan, assisting with simple tasks he could no longer manage on his own. During their conversations, Samantha shared pieces of her own story, and one detail in particular deeply moved Dylan. She spoke about an out-of-tune piano her parents had bought when she was a child. Her father, despite having limited resources, spent hours teaching her to play, transforming that imperfect instrument into a portal to a world of dreams. Samantha had never had the chance to study music formally, but her love for every melody remained alive within her. When Samantha learned that Dylan was a pianist, she felt instantly moved. He had achieved everything she never could: the stage, the audiences, the grandeur of music. "I grew up loving music because it was where I found joy," she said one day, her eyes sparkling. "Hearing your story and seeing your passion reminds me of what music truly means." It doesn't matter how out of tune the piano is or how broken we are, music finds a way to transform us. Those words struck a chord deep within Dylan, and he began to realize that despite his tragedy, there was still something worth fighting for. One day, immersed in despair, Dylan asked Samantha to play the piano in the living room. He knew the request was unusual, but deep down, he felt a need to hear music again, even if it came from someone else. Hesitant, Samantha looked at him, her emotions raw and exposed. "I don't know if I can," she murmured, but seeing the profound sadness in Dylan's eyes, she gathered her courage. Sitting at the piano, her trembling hands touched the keys, and the first note filled the air. Slowly, the melody began to take shape, each sound carrying memories of her childhood, the out-of-tune piano at home, and her father, who had taught her with so much love. As the notes flowed, tears welled in her eyes, but Samantha continued. Every key she pressed felt like a conversation with her past, a tribute to the man who had taught her to love music. Dylan remained still, initially in shock and then completely absorbed. Her performance wasn't technically perfect, but it carried such genuine and raw emotion that it seemed to transform the very air around them. For the first time since the accident, Dylan felt a spark of hope. It wasn't just the music, it was Samantha's soul he could hear in every note. He realized that even amidst pain and loss, music still had the power to heal and inspire. As Samantha played, the serene, emotionally charged atmosphere in the room was abruptly interrupted by Stephanie's arrival. Like a cold wind invading a warm haven, her presence altered the mood instantly. She entered with firm steps, her expression full of disdain, and let out a cynical laugh that cut through the air like a blade. Her eyes first landed on Samantha, then on Dylan, who remained silent, absorbing the music that filled the space like a balm for his pain. "What a pathetic scene," Stephanie sneered, mocking both Dylan and Samantha. Her voice, dripping with contempt, echoed through the room, turning what had been an intimate and touching moment into something tense and uncomfortable. Samantha paused her playing for a moment, her hands hesitating over the keys, but something inside her refused to be intimidated. Samantha, typically reserved, raised her head and looked directly at Stephanie, her eyes now gleaming with determination. "Greatness doesn't lie in the hands but in the heart," she said firmly, her words carrying a truth that silenced the room. Despite her trembling hands, she resumed playing, filling the space once again with a melody that seemed to repel the venom of Stephanie's words. Dylan, watching everything intently, felt a spark of strength reignite within him. For the first time, he realized that despite his losses, there were people who still believed in his greatness, even if that greatness needed to be redefined. After a few days, Dylan decided it was time to end his relationship with Stephanie. He realized there was no sense in staying with someone who showed no real interest in supporting him. Her growing emotional distance had become unbearable in light of his new needs. He knew he had to start fresh, focus on his rehabilitation, and surround himself with people who genuinely cared about him. Seeing that she no longer had control over Dylan, Stephanie decided to leave him. Her departure, instead of being a reason for sadness, was a relief. Without the burden of an empty relationship, Dylan found a constant and encouraging presence in Samantha. With her support, he embarked on his rehabilitation journey. Every small victory was celebrated as a shared triumph. As the days passed, Dylan felt increasingly connected to Samantha. Her gentle gestures in helping him with even the simplest tasks and her warm companionship made an immense difference in his life. Samantha was not only caring but also funny, kind, and full of a light energy that brought peace to Dylan's days. Her presence transformed every moment, filling the house with laughter and comforting conversations. Dylan began to realize that his feelings for Samantha went far beyond gratitude. Each day, he found himself thinking about her more, noticing how she did everything with such dedication and how her eyes sparkled when she spoke about the simple joys of life. He realized he didn't just want Samantha as someone helping with his recovery. He wanted her as a part of his life, a truly special woman who had appeared during his darkest moment and somehow brought light and peace to his days. Dylan knew he needed to do something special, something that would show Samantha how much her presence and support had transformed his life. After weeks of therapy and quiet practice, he finally gathered the courage to sit at the piano. Using special gloves to protect his hands, still recovering, he began to play. The melody was simple, but it carried a depth of emotion that filled the room like a warm embrace. Each note felt like an unspoken conversation, an implicit thank you for everything Samantha had done. Samantha walked into the room, completely unprepared for the scene unfolding before her. Her eyes filled with tears as she listened, unable to contain her emotions. Seeing Dylan there, battling his limitations yet creating something so beautiful, touched a corner of her soul she didn't even know existed. Along with the emotion, something else began to stir in her heart. She realized she was starting to feel something for Dylan, something far deeper than she had anticipated. Samantha knew her feelings for Dylan went beyond admiration or care. It was something profound, yet she hesitated to acknowledge it. After all, she was just a housekeeper, someone who had entered his life by chance. Even though they had developed a wonderful connection over time, she feared crossing a boundary. So she chose to keep her feelings hidden, concealed behind a warm smile and gentle actions. Yet, every moment spent with Dylan only made her feelings grow, like a melody that refused to fade away. The days passed, and both Dylan and Samantha kept their feelings silent. They continued with their routines, but something was slowly shifting. Their glances lingered longer, casual touches carried a different energy, and an unspoken tension filled the air, something neither dared to address. An invisible yet tangible bond seemed to grow between them, something they both felt but couldn't express. Dylan, whose heart was overflowing with love for Samantha, decided he could no longer hide how he felt. He wanted her to know but needed to find the right way to reveal his feelings. With great effort and despite the limitations of his hands, he decided to compose a special melody for her. Over several days, he poured himself into the task, struggling through the challenges but determined to create something that conveyed everything in his heart. Finally, Dylan sent Samantha an invitation to a special dinner at his mansion. He gave few details, leaving her intrigued. Samantha, on the other hand, felt apprehensive. Countless thoughts raced through her mind. Is this something serious? Is he going to let me go? She wondered, trying to decipher the reason for the invitation. On the appointed evening, Samantha arrived on time. As she stepped into the dining room, she was rendered speechless. The room was beautifully decorated with soft lighting, candles, and flowers, creating a magical atmosphere. At the center of the room sat Dylan, dressed in an elegant formal suit, at the piano. She froze in the doorway, her heart pounding. Before she could say a word, Dylan began to play. Using his special gloves, he moved his fingers across the keys, filling the room with a melody brimming with emotion and meaning. Samantha froze, mesmerized by the moment. The piano notes seemed to tell a story, a confession Dylan couldn't express with words. When the music ended, he stood up, walking slowly toward her. His eyes were locked on hers as he gently took her hands. "Samantha," he began, his voice thick with emotion, "you've changed my life in ways I never imagined. You brought light to my darkest days, and I can't hide what I feel any longer. I love you, not just for the way you care for me, but for who you are. I want to be by your side, not as your employer, but as someone who admires you and loves you deeply." Tears began to stream down Samantha's face, but this time, they weren't tears of sadness. She looked at him, her heart racing, and for the first time, she let her own feelings surface. "Dylan," she said, her voice trembling, "I love you too. I've tried to hide it because I was afraid, but I can't anymore. You're special to me in a way I never expected." Without saying another word, they leaned closer, and their lips met in a passionate kiss. It was as though all the tension and suppressed emotions were finally released, marking the beginning of a new chapter in their lives. From that night on, Dylan and Samantha decided they wanted to be together and build a future side by side. Their relationship grew even stronger, rooted in respect, admiration, and true love. Dylan continued to work hard on his rehabilitation, but now he had Samantha by his side, not just as a supporter but as a partner who shared his dreams and his new journey. Over the months, they transformed the mansion into a home filled with laughter, music, and love. Samantha discovered more about herself with Dylan by her side, and he, in turn, rediscovered his passion for life and music, which he thought he had lost. Together, they began planning new projects. Dylan wanted to teach music to underprivileged children, and Samantha dedicated herself to helping people who, like her, had big dreams but limited resources. The future was bright, not because everything was perfect, but because they were willing to face any challenge together. Dylan often said that despite everything he had lost, he had gained something far greater, the love and companionship of Samantha. And to her, Dylan was living proof that miracles happen in the most unexpected ways. With light hearts and hopeful eyes, they moved forward together, building a life where love and music remained the melody that guided their days. Did you enjoy this emotional story of love, resilience, and renewal? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Share your rating for this story in the comments, and let us know which moment touched your heart the most. Your feedback is so important to us. Thank you for being here on our channel, and we'll see you next time.